Misunderstood Genius here, aka MG. Today I have with me Elise Berggreen, and we're going to be talking a little bit about her career and how she got into it, and just a couple other things. Elise, thank you so much.
So welcome.
I appreciate it. Like you're like a quadruple threat. I mean,
thank
actress.
You so much.
Yeah, actress. I mean, you take a dance. You do voiceovers. I mean, you write. So tell me, like, how did that all start for you?
So it all started with theater when I was a kid. It started first with dance and then musical theater, and my whole dream was to be on Broadway. It still is, but I got a little sidetracked when I realized how exciting working in film is, and that sidetrack ended up turning into a life passion. And making funny voices is always exciting, so I'm never upset to do voiceover work. Absolutely. And that's a big part of my life, especially right now.
Okay. And I mean, as far as covering all that, I mean, I know you moved around a lot as well. So you're originally from Phoenix, Arizona.
I am. Born and raised.
Born and raised. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how long were you there before you came to Atlanta, or and then New Orleans, and then to LA? Tell me a little bit about the timeline.
Yeah. So I, from Phoenix, ended up going to New Orleans for school. I went to Loyola University in New Orleans, and they gave me some scholarships, which was really exciting. So I got to perform for Loyola, and they were also the only school that let me get 3 majors because I had a deal with my family. I've always wanted to be an actor. I tried to go out to LA when they were doing the Hannah Montana auditions when I was like 11.
Oh, that's a nice little.
And my parents were like, we're not uprooting the whole family. You can pursue this as a normal person and then do this as a career when you're an adult or when you can do it on your own.
Right.
And at 17, I went and got my own agency in Arizona without telling them. And then they were like, actually, you need an adult to sign the contract because you're not 18. And so, and I just turned 17, and so I go to my mom and I say, Mom, I did this thing with this agency, they really want to sign me, please. And I started off doing that, and that's one of the reasons that I was able to do what I did at Loyola and be able to travel from there. And I did a lot of traveling when I was at Loyola. I got to study abroad in Sydney, and that was really exciting. And then they let me do all different kinds of majors, and the deal with my family was you are allowed to leave college when you're done. Like whatever timeline that is. And that was the deal I made with them because they're all in medicine and they're really about higher education. And a year and a half into my college experience, I finished my first major because I was hell-bent to get to Hollywood. And
wow.
I really, really wanted to be an actor and not just, and I shouldn't say just, but the community theater route is really lovely. It just wasn't for me long-term. So I demanded from myself that I get out of school as quickly as I could, and I went to them and I was like, see, look, I'm done. The thing online, it says I'm done. Please, Mom and Dad. And they're like, yeah, but you're already there, so just like see what happens and like study something else. And I was like, okay. And ended up studying in a completely different subject. So I first did an advertising degree, and then journalism and theater, like all within those 4 years. And studied abroad because they kept tacking things on of things I needed to do. But now I got all these degrees, which is kind of cool. Educated.
That is insane.
Yeah. And then I lived in New Orleans for a couple of years following college, 2 years after I graduated, because I got signed with an agency there that is a fantastic agency. And then I moved here 6 months ago, and I always split half of my year with LA.
Gotcha.
Make it a little complicated.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But it seems that you were kind of born and bred for this lifestyle. I mean, considering how, being in school, going over the different majors, you just wanted to do this. It was just in your blood. I'm going to do whatever it takes. So if you need to have a split lifestyle and balance gigs and everything like that, you're definitely going to do whatever you need to do. That is amazing.
I've always wanted, I started off wanting to be like Britney Spears or something, and I was like, that's unreasonable. Like as a 5-year-old, I was like, being Britney Spears is unreasonable.
I don't know, does Britney Spears have 3 degrees?
She's got her whole, I think she's set otherwise.
Right.
And then it moved on to like, I want to be Idina Menzel. And now I just would love to perform all the time. I love it. There's something really freeing about embodying the experience of other people and getting to do that in an audience that reaches so many people. Film and television, that medium, as opposed to, I love theater so much and I'd still love to do it, but you're limited to the people that are in your audience.
You are.
As opposed to somebody that from the freedom of their own income structure, their house, where they live, their location, can be a part of whatever you need.
So for your first gig in that moment, how did you feel? Considering how hard you worked to get to Hollywood, to get, with an agency, how did it feel to get your first gig?
Funny enough, it happened on accident, so it felt really overwhelming and underwhelming at the same time.
Right.
It was not through my agency, which was also exciting because I got my first gig on my own, and I was on set, and I was so hell-bent to be on set that that I went straight for broke, and I was doing extra work. I was like, I will get on set however I can.
Right.
And as an extra, they looked at me and we were all talking, and it was a very small, closed set. So there were only like 3 of us as extras. It was very small for some reason. It was like an indie film that ended up being a Ron Howard project. That it had like one of those cloak titles where it's Nomer is something else. So we were all like, oh, it's this random indie film that's paying us like no money. We're pretty much doing this for free, and they're barely giving us lunch. And then they asked me what I do, and I told them that I was an actor and what I had studied, and that I'd done theater for the last 15 years.
Right.
And they're like, oh, well, do you want a couple of lines? And I was like, excuse me? Do I want a couple of lines? And they're like, yeah, it's a SAG project. You'll have to fill out paperwork. You SAG? And I was like, be still, my heart. What? I'm sorry, what? No, I'm not SAG. I mean, yeah, I can be SAG for you. No, I can't. I'm sorry, I'm not SAG. And ended up being a Ron Howard project.
I said you did it all on your own, just being.
I mean, to a certain point, the passion will get you in the door to start, and then after that, you have to start networking and marketing yourself and building a family in this industry, because that is so important. And I'm especially now realizing how important that is. Right.
Now, would you consider, that being difficult? You're new on the scene. You want to make the right relationships with people. You don't want to step on any toes. You don't want to make any of the wrong crosses. So, what was your thought process in that? Of course you have to be intelligent, in who you speak to and how. But how was that process for you?
To be honest, I'm just now getting to a point where you're gonna mess up. 2 years ago, I would have had some really great advice for you that sounded all poetic and just, but it really is true that the older you get, that you just realize that there is no right way to tell people how to do it. There are going to be a lot of right ways, especially in this industry. No 2 people have had the same career. It's just not possible. It's not like going into a structure that has a corporate life and an environment. You go to a certain number of years of school. There are people that have become mega successful that just have a really great way to tune themselves into this market and their talents, and they don't need training. There are other people that train for 20 years. There are some people, it's all about who you meet and who you know. I'm apologizing ahead of time to the film gods that it is entirely who you know and who you meet. And if you meet somebody that sees that you really want this and you're talented, it can just happen. And sometimes it could be having a conversation at 2 a.m. with that person about Cheez-Its or whatever it might be, and you end up becoming best friends. And sometimes it's walking into an office of a giant producer's room and booking the room. Everybody does it differently.
That's very true.
But the best thing I can say is that this career, more than I would say almost any other career, it beats you up. More hard days, especially in the beginning, than there are good days. It's why most actors quit before 5 years. And the less that actors and or just film creatives, I'm also a writer, don't beat yourself up for everything you get wrong, because the first couple of years are going to be the hardest. You're going to mess up a bunch because you don't know any better, and no 2 people have done this alike. That's like saying make the perfect abstract artwork. No 2 abstract pieces have ever been the same, so how is it supposed to be perfect?
Very true.
So just learn to forgive yourself and how to get better and redirect.
That is a great point, forgiving yourself and learning how to, but to do it immediately. Sometimes it'll take people months, years, and then we're wasting time.
Yeah.
So that's a great point.
Well, and you'll go from getting 1 audition a week to 15 auditions a week. You're going to have to at some point quit your day job, and it's going to be really stressful. You won't always know how money's coming in. There's so many things that will go right and go wrong that if you don't learn how to immediately forgive yourself, and I'm not the best at this, so I won't say that I've mastered it, but at least I know that that's a problem area.
Right. Like you're aware.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the most important thing. So, as far as a preparation for an audition, or if you're shooting, if you're updating your reel, how do you kind of enter that zone of preparing yourself for what you're about to do? Do you just kind of walk into it? Oh, it's just another day at work, or did you kind of give yourself a mental pep talk? Are there certain things that you replay in your mind that lets you know, hey, I've done this before here, there. This is nothing. It's all the same. Let me just go ahead and knock it out.
Yeah. I think it's entirely in your preparation. I think a lot of actors, the most common mistake I made when I was first starting out is that I would flounder when I wasn't as prepared as I thought. And prepared doesn't just mean memorizing your lines. I think that a lot of people are like, oh, I know this character, I can get into it. I just have to memorize the lines and I just have to throw myself into it. And that's not all that you're doing.
Right.
You have to remember that you are fully becoming a different person. Even if it's for 5 minutes in an audition room, you are that person. So you should do everything from in more method work and emotional diary to make sure that you know what that person thinks. Like when you woke up this morning, how was your day different than theirs? And things like that.
Right.
Versus some characters will be very close to you, but they won't always be you. So you have to remember that even when it comes to, let's say I'm playing somebody that's very similar to me, but I tend to play with my hair a lot or something, and they don't. Even little things like that, those matter. Because one of the most talked about scenes in the entire film for Black Panther, which I saw last night,
I haven't seen it yet.
One of the actors in it, in a very quick, quirky scene, somebody is chanting in his face, and he just looks over and goes. And that little look is one of the most talked about things for the movie, is because reactions are everything, and he had that was true to the character, which if he had just been himself, he might have been still in that moment.
Very true.
So whatever gets you into a place, whatever method you adopt, that makes sure that you're aware that everything about what you're doing is that character, from the way that you apply chapstick in the morning to your makeup. It's not just how you look and how you think you're giving a vibe.
That's true. Very, very true. Now, do you have a favorite project that you're working on? Maybe you can't talk about it, or that you've worked on in the past, and if so, why was that your favorite?
So, funny enough, one of the favorite projects I've ever worked on, it was an untitled short film. Because it's silly how those things end up becoming some of your most favorite. And then I would say my other favorite is a film that it started off as a TV pilot and a short film pitch concept. It's called Shepherd. And that actually, we just won ITV Fest in Vermont with that. And so that's getting optioned to HBO as we speak. And one of our co-stars, Kelvin Harrison Jr., he just went to Sundance for a few of his projects. Another one of our co-stars, Lance Nichols, he is traveling all over the world, and he's doing some really amazing projects as well. And we just had a really great community. It's all the New Orleans community to start. So that was where I started my career. That's where I went to school. And that community is the reason that I am here now, working as I am and doing what I can. Because they were like, oh, you've never been on a film set? Let's change that. And any other city would have been like, we'll give you a few years to rough it out.
That's it. So you're surrounding yourself with people who are really thriving in their field. How important is it to you? Maybe it is more so now than it was before, in your past, or whether it was in school or before school, but to be around people who are very ambitious and seek, intellect and seek, their passions. How important is it for you to be around people like that?
It's everything. I did not place a lot of weight on it when I got into this career, and I noticed that in the same way that if you're going to be out at 2 in the morning, you might be a little bit tired the next day. You were out, you were up late. It's the same way with putting yourself in a field of energy, essentially, with other people. However you interpret that, metaphysically or not. It's whoever you're around will absolutely determine what you end up doing. Everyone's like, oh, I have the power of choice, I have freedom. Yes, you do. But you're also influenced by your environment, and that includes the people you're with.
Right, and a conscience.
Absolutely.
We're thinking one thing, but internally it could be something else. We're just not realizing it, or we're not, aware of it.
Well, and something as silly as if you're out at a bar or a restaurant with a group of people you consider your connections or your friends, and you mention, let's say, an audition or a screenplay that you're working on, and you just casually drop in a conversation. something that they advise or they comment about whatever you're doing could affect what you end up doing with it, whether you realize it or not. And so if they're like, oh, that's a great idea, maybe you'll get inspired and you'll go home later and you'll write a whole other screenplay because of it. Or if they're like, I don't know, like maybe that won't do anything, you might leave that conversation less inspired.
Right.
So I personally, this business is hard enough. We've got enough people shutting doors in our faces all the time.
I hear that.
If you think about, every actor does hundreds and hundreds of auditions, and they might book a couple out of those because sometimes you're just not what they're looking for, and sometimes it is what it is. So if you're going to have that many doors shut in your face, I want to be around people that are all about opening doors.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, in the acting world, you hear a lot about the Me Too movement and how people are being affected by that. So have you ever experienced harassment on set or, on your journey?
I have, unfortunately. So it's something that happens to a lot of women. I actually don't know a woman in film that hasn't experienced it, which it sounds like one of those things where it's like, oh, well, how are we supposed to be careful? I know guys who have experienced it too.
Right.
That is definitely not without it. One of my best actor friends, he was on a set where the producer was meeting up with him for dinners and realized that it wasn't for work.
Right.
And so it happens to men and women, which I think that needs to be absolutely acknowledged because it happens to people. And this is just an environment that we need to make sure that is not acceptable. And I know it's a hard line in the sand to draw, like where is the line when you're working 18-hour days and there's a lot of partying and drinking involved in this industry, and there's a lot of like, oh, but we're family, we're around each other for so long every day, this is normal. And I think it starts with the people that are in power taking credit for having to draw the line somewhere and standing up and defending that line. Because there was, I won't say which show, but there was a network show that I did work on, and I received some inappropriate behavior from one of the crew members, and it was absolutely out of line, and like 5 other crew members saw it. And only one of those crew members that saw it was willing to speak up because they didn't want to lose their job. And that one that did is the reason that man was removed from set and didn't do that to another woman. And I'm so thankful to the person that spoke up, because with just my testimony, the other person, the guilty party, of course they denied it. Who would want to admit to that? A bunch of people saw it. Why would they want to do that? And because of the person that said, yeah, I saw that, this is exactly what happened, this is exactly what I heard, and went immediately and dealt with it, it was the reason it was handled. But I've seen a lot of situations where people are like, I don't know what I saw, man, like, I don't want to get involved, and it's like, at the end of the day, you have one, whatever subject it is, whether it's your creativity or your integrity, you get to live life once.
Right.
And if you're not going to stand up for defending other people and yourself, and you're not going to try and make sure that, like, the righteousness of, like, people not getting used and abused is something you pride yourself on, then what are you looking back on?
Right. And I've noticed this where people are less selfless, are becoming more and more less selfless. It's like there has to be an incentive for someone to be kind, to be respectful. Like, what do I get for helping you, figure this out, or for saving you? Like, do I get a favor? It's like, I saved you from harassment, what are you going to do for me? It's things like that. So, even like, and I know you've had other situations, so how do you deal with it personally? Have some of those experiences carried over, or do you just know how to deal with people in the future because of it? What not to say, how to get out of it?
I've definitely learned some of the areas where, you're all joking on set and somebody makes an inappropriate joke and you just want to be like one in the club, whether it's one of the boys or not, like, it doesn't matter what your gender is. You just want to be one of them, and you kind of chime in, and then you realize that the line just got murky. And it's unfortunate to not be able to just, like, shoot the shit with everybody, but sometimes you just have to remember that you're at work, and it's the same way that, like, if you were to go into a corporate office, you have to remember, like, what may or may not set things off.
Right.
And that's, it's not fun to have to do that, but that is life. And I personally hold myself to a standard where, like, I spoke up for one of my jobs last year, and I said what was wrong and what was going on. And I can't advocate that everybody do this because it is a very difficult thing to do, but I lost the role that I was in. We were in pre-production for the role, and I was already experiencing things that were vastly inappropriate, and I said something, and they took me off the project, and they blamed it on something else.
Right. So for speaking up, you know for a fact that you were removed just for speaking up.
Absolutely. I know exactly what happened. And that, it was awful, and I still can't really tell anybody in detail what happened, because sometimes it is true. Powerful people can hold these things over you the same way that if your ex-boss went and told people a bunch of bad things about you, you'd be a little afraid that they would believe them. And it's like, oh, well, until I'm in this position of power. So sometimes, if there is no other option, you just have to escape the situation. No longer remove yourself from the entity that is the problem, and then address what you can from there, and then do your best to uphold the values that you hold dear, because it doesn't matter how far you get in your career if you realize that you lost all of your integrity along the way.
Right.
Are you going to be happy with how you got there? And it is much harder. If I had still stayed on that project, my career would look very different right now. And it's difficult for me to look back and be like, wow, I stood up for myself and I totally got beat down because of it. And that was a really hard couple of months following. You know, that you sign on to a project and you think you have a source of income and all of these things, and then you lose everything for a couple of months, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm starting over right now. And it happens to people all the time.
And in those moments of, okay, I'm out of a role, these next 6-7 months, what am I going to do? You know, how do you find your solitude in that?
I won't say that the last time it happened, I was great at handling it. It can be very depressing. There are a lot of people that think that you randomly either like have dropped out of a project, or you mysteriously disappear from like this sort of environment because you're trying to remove yourself without making it, you know, something that it needs not be. But it's very difficult, and you have to remember that this may or may not be the last time that this will happen, but that you know how to handle it. And then you go back in and you dive into your career and you say, I was on this path and this wasn't working, so how do I redirect and how do I reconstruct and attack this from a different angle that maybe will allow me to not deal with this again?
Exactly. Well, I'm glad that you were able to not necessarily move on from it, but you know how to move and shake now, and that didn't stop you from excelling. Like, you're continuing to get roles, you're continuing to network with the right people, and it doesn't seem that, you know, it hinders you long enough to take you out for the count, to completely remove you from the career. So
I think it's really important that, yes, as much as it is always vital that everybody that is not necessarily the top level of leadership be aware of this structure, the people that will ideally make the difference are people like I was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or whoever, that are these little girls sitting watching some, you know, YouTube podcast or whatever it might be, that see that somebody that's a little bit older than them and or has done something they haven't done yet was willing to suffer a little bit to make sure that the right decision was made. And I watched a lot of women come before me, and men alike. I watched people like my dad stand up for the right thing in their company, and my mom, and they don't even work in film. And it's all about watching the right people, or even the wrong people, make the right decisions all the time. And the more that people do it, the more it will happen. So if we stop encouraging people that they're going to have this fast track if they're just willing to screw everybody over and make all these really nasty decisions, that's not actually true. The more people you screw over along the way, the more you'll suffer later, but you'll get there quickly.
Right. That is very true. Very true. So what would you say was your biggest lesson that you've learned, both personally and professionally?
It sounds really silly, but, and this is gonna sound like so yogi, but in the most neutral way possible, like, love yourself and love other people. If you mess up, still love yourself. If other people betray you or they accidentally do something, nobody's perfect.
Right.
And for the amount of times that sometimes we're like, oh, but I didn't do anything wrong in this situation, or I didn't handle this, like, they were the ones that messed up. Like, we're all gonna mess up. You just have to know when to draw the line, of course. So you say, well, this is where I defend my own integrity versus continue to suffer through this thing. But I know so many actors and so many writers and so many directors, producers, film cinematographers, all of these people that work in this creative field it is very easy, especially when you are not directly on the uphill climb or near the top of the mountain, to beat yourself up. It is easily the career killer of most people. They get down on themselves, and it is so easy to get into this dark headspace that you can't get yourself out of, and you don't even realize how you got there. And just continue to love yourself. When you're not booking, when you are booking, when the role is easy, when it's not, when your script is garbage, and you write another one, and that one ends up being gold, or when you shoot a short film that somebody color corrected backwards and it's all yellow and you're like, why did we waste all this time? That happened to me at the very beginning of my career. It happens to us all. Things will always go wrong and they will always go right. So instead of focusing on like the path and how you took a wrong turn, everything is about course correction.
Right.
So if you know how to course correct and realize that the same way that if I'm going from my house to the grocery store, it's not always that you took a wrong turn, you just need to figure out how to get there still. Instead of focusing on the wrong turn you made, which would distract you and delay you even more, you just need to get there. And if you don't beat yourself up while you're doing it and you just focus on where you're going in the positive aspect of course correcting and loving who you are and loving other people, then life gets a lot easier.
Right.
Like so much easier.
I feel like that's kind of in now, where the whole love yourself, you know, do for self, be for self. That's in, and you see that, you know, whether it's promoted on social media by different celebrities, like that's what they're pushing. They're trying to push to these young kids, and I know it's a process. Like, but where was your? I guess at what age you said you reached that crescent where you fully loved yourself? Because you didn't necessarily get there immediately, or whether in high school. So where were you? At what point in time did you reach that point to where you're like, oh, you know what? I realize I love myself, and like nothing else can change that. Like what age would you say was that? Was it recent? Was it a couple of years back?
I think I'm always working on it. I think we go in ebbs and flows of doing it. One day we'll really mess something up and it's really bad, and we'll just beat down on ourselves, and it feels like nothing can go right. And then there are other days where you're like, I'm on top of the world and this is the greatest day ever, and of course I'm like a fiery awesome person.
Right.
So it's a continuing cycle. It's not something that I personally believe that you do once and you're just like, yep, this is the thing from now on. Like, just like loving your siblings or loving your parents or your best friend, like it's a thing that you constantly have to work on continuing to love them despite what either one of you do. The relationship you have with other people is the same that you have with yourself, in the sense that it is constantly something you have to work on. You're always going to have to work on treating your body well, treating your mental health well. You're always going to have to work on, getting the right amount of sleep and what you're doing in your activities. Like, it is a process.
The balance.
And it's not just like mentally loving yourself, because if you don't treat your body right long enough, you'll stop loving yourself mentally. So it's ongoing, and I'm getting better at it the older I get, but that's mainly just because I've realized how I've failed at it in the past, and failed in the way that now I know how to improve. But it's so important with social media. We went 40 years ago from a culture that you got exposed to maybe 10 images throughout a day, whether it be in your textbook in school or your office. And it's not images like paintings, but like images of what everybody in society was doing. It was your newspaper, it was your television, and then that was it. And now, before most kids even finish waking up in the morning, they've seen thousands of images on Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat, and it is really easy with all these things that fix what reality is, and they contort what reality is to make you feel badly about yourself. But like, even right now, if I had seen this as a kid and I'm like, oh my god, but she looks so perfect. No, I had dry shampoo in my hair, and I did my hair, and I got makeup on, and I have dark circles, and I'm trying to look more awake. And that is, like, we alter reality so much, and we make it look real. All these, like, hashtag no filter, and...
But there's filters, like, it's always a filter.
And it's great if there isn't. But you just have to remember that, like, you have to learn how to love yourself no matter what you're experiencing, because nothing you'll ever see on social media is totally an accurate depiction of reality. Because even my social media, I have to think about it as like a magazine. Your Instagram, especially for people in the business world, is an online magazine advertising who you are. So if you see a supermodel in an ad, that can be the equivalent of Instagram for most people, especially actors nowadays. Like, if you look at somebody famous, super famous, like Lea Michele, she's gorgeous. But, like, all those pictures are exactly placed in such a way that it makes you think and feel a certain thing, just like advertisements. And it doesn't mean she's advertising anything other than her lifestyle and her, and she's beautiful, but we're all beautiful.
Right.
So, if you learn how to love yourself, things like that don't break you down as often.
Right. I like your take on that.
Thank you. It was a hard road to get there, but I'm starting to figure some stuff out.
So what continues to motivate you and inspire you on your road? Like, just a couple of things that you hold dear, that push you daily.
The people that surround me. Like I said, it's all about your environment, and I am quickly learning, just through the hard knocks that life has to serve you, that it's entirely about the people that you put in your life. Because there are some days that you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, I don't have it in me today.
Right.
Especially when you've worked 1,000,000 hours and you've done hundreds of auditions and you haven't booked a single one of them, or you've written your screenplay and it just got rejected by the 10th person. It will work out eventually, but there's some days you're going to wake up and you just don't have it in you.
Right.
And it's calls to the people that I love, or them showing up at my house, or me being 2,000 miles away from them and them still wanting to FaceTime to make sure that I'm okay and that I want to make sure they're okay. Those are the people that get you through your day, because you're always going to have to find ways to be inspired yourself and work through these things. Of course, that's most important, but there are just going to be days that, like, we are human, we are infallible, and we can only do so much to be perfect.
Right.
And sometimes you just need a boost from somebody that you really trust and that has the same thing in mind that you do. But otherwise, like, find whatever makes you at peace.
Which would be outside of
I personally found it in doing, just like paying attention to how healthy I was, and not healthy in the way that, like, it's a certain weight or what you do with your life, but some people do bodybuilding and that makes them feel healthy. Some people eat burgers or salads, or they do yoga, like whatever makes you feel healthy. I've noticed that physical activity helps me to just, like, feel more at peace, and making sure that I am always pursuing something creatively. That is why I'm also a screenwriter, is because I can produce my own projects and dive into these characters that either I've made for myself or that I've created for other people. And it's always important to just, like, build up your skill set, whether it be through hobbies or something you enjoy, that makes you not just concentrate on the audition you have coming up next. Like, be a person outside of it.
That's true. That's true. I will say that we kind of get wrapped up in becoming something or being something that we just forget what made us who we are in the first place.
Absolutely.
And, our hobbies and passions, chasing dollars, which is, a lot of us millennials sometimes get in the habit of doing. But we don't take a step back to breathe or to acknowledge family, to acknowledge people that held us down throughout our growing process. So I feel that's definitely important to be aware of that. So where can they find you? You want to shout out your social media or kind of tell us what we can expect from you in the future?
Absolutely. So I am on Instagram as Elise Berggreen, and that's iceberg and the color green, berg, green, like the color, yeah. And and then I think I'm still on Twitter as the Berg, because that was my nickname growing up. That started back in college, the Berg. And yeah, that's what they called my sister and I. And if you do Pinterest, I'm also on Pinterest, and my website is always just my name, or you can search me on IMDb, my name as well, and I'm sure we'll put that up there. And then you can tag me and stuff if you have questions, or let me know if you want to know anything else. I'm sure that I could talk all day about the things that I've learned. I've only been doing this for a little while, so sometimes you feel like you've lived 10 years in this industry.
Especially with the fast-paced environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. But yes, all the links will be in the description, so check it out. And thank you so much, Elise. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Genius, out.